Hello, viewers, and welcome to the latest Huddle. I'm with Matt Heiman, co-founder of the Game Day. Matt, thanks very much for rejoining us.
My pleasure being here.
We're going to talk about some pretty exciting stuff. U.S. online sports betting market, bit of iGaming maybe. But to start off with, can you tell us what's been the latest at the Game Day?
Well, I mean, it's been a big year. We kind of look at statistics year over year. And at the start of the year, we looked at New York being a new market in 2022, Ohio being a new market in 2023. How would we do, right? Apples to apples, same betting season, same sports calendar, really good chance to test a new market versus a new market.
Yeah.
Clearly, New York, bigger state, et cetera, et cetera. We kind of weighed that against us having grown for a year and really got to test, everybody's bonus pack to say how have we done on growing our business in a near identical market. So we were 5x for revenue in January this year versus January the previous year, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
That's always exciting. And fast forwarding to September, the question is always, can you keep that momentum, right? And growth, et cetera. And then when we look September over September, the good news is on registrations and first-time deposits, we're 2x last year. So what's nice is we're already big, but we're continuing to put some big numbers on the board and grow. And I think the piece that maybe we didn't see coming would be the mix of revenue. And you mentioned sports betting, iGaming. I think sweeps is also something to start talking about seriously.
Yeah, I think that's something we had Matt Davey on earlier, and he was discussing sweepstakes and fantasy. So definitely take your point on that. You guys are quite uniquely placed in a sort of a spot, I guess, between affiliate and sports betting media, if that's fair to say. A couple of follow-up questions from that. More specifically, obviously, I want to talk to you about ESPN Bet because I think that's one of the biggest talking points at the moment. But let's tee that up by, if I were to ask you, what's your take on the wider trend of convergence, media and betting coming together?
So I think there's a couple themes in that. One is always in media, I think we need to think about conventional media, so everything up to digital, and then think about digital. And so I think when the most obvious example would be, I don't know, my, say, great uncle watches, I'm from Winnipeg, so he watches NHL hockey, and he might say, oh my God, there's all these betting adverts, where the hell they come from? And so there's a natural convergence even through someone who's 90s eyes, and that's happened. I think on more to the question of digital and how are kind of the broader legalization of online sports betting, I think the real convergence will come when we feel as comfortable on the digital feed seeing the score as we do seeing the line. So the score of the game and the line on the game. And so I think that we're close at the moment in terms of convergence, in terms of like message and media, as in here's an advert, or click here to ... or some in-game betting, which is pretty micro at the moment. I'm actually a big believer in the longer term on that, but putting that aside for the moment, I think we're maybe 20% down the road on convergence, where it's the ability to see and bet simultaneously. Or the ability, my last business, for example, ran a watch along. So you'd be watching the game, say on television, but through your phone, you might be having a Facebook feed of an alternative commentary. And so that to me is real convergence, where you're actually watching the game, but maybe only finding out where the line's at, what the Sharpies are up to, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't feel like we're there yet in any way, shape, or form. And then, of course, there's ultimate convergence, which is just click on screen to bet, which is, I think, it's a little bit sci-fi, but it's probably coming as well.
So you, I mean, it might be a silly question given that where you are at the Game Day, that's kind of your business, but you're a firm believer that model works, because I guess a counterpoint is if someone, for example, me in the UK, actually, it's not a good example because Sky Bet is so good and Sky Sports. But let's say I go to...
That's a hell of a compliment, because once Sky bought my last business, Sky Bet integrated with us and we started to do a lot of that work. So I'm going to only pause you there to say thank you very much.
Let's say I looked at flash scores for my scores. And I bet with Bet365, and for me the two are separate. And is there a I guess the question is, how big of the market is there a segment that would maybe never cross the two over?
You live in the UK?
Yes.
You know that some games are streamed via Bet365 directly. They don't actually go through Sky or another. So in that case, it's a really integrated experience. And you can actually be on your phone watching, playing at the same time. And that to me that kind of lean in culture is really why, after selling my previous business, we did the game day, particularly specifically in the US, where DFS got people leaning into sports content in a way that they hadn't around 25 years ago. So I really felt as things legalized, people are already leaning in to real-time gameplay through setting up, however they're playing their DFS piece, but they're actually feel like they're participating in the game. It's an active digital experience already. So that slight, small move to putting some money in behind it, to me, felt like it was going to come hard and fast. And I think there's been examples where that's lived up to the promise, and probably examples where it hasn't quite got there yet. Does that answer your question?
It does. I think the main answer is yes, you're a proponent, and you've given some very strong examples of how it works. So yeah, I think definitely you did answer it. And let's apply this, as I teased earlier, specifically to ESPN Bet.
Okay.
Big story, big news. We were all over it when it came out, because it was almost like it's happened. It's fine. ESPN Bet is a thing. It's been touted for a long time. But I guess the big question is conversion. How successful will they be?
Yeah, I think it's probably challenging in the near term, because there's just a lot of learning to moving from being a media company to betting convergence. I think the piece where they particularly maybe aren't that analogous to Sky Bet, which has been obviously a massive success, is that Sky, I believe, I had spent a lot of time with Richard before he sold the business, and I believe they had 15 years of legal online betting before Sky Bet started. And Sky would have been running a lot of ads and seen a lot of what worked and didn't work before they launched Sky Bet. The second piece is, we became fairly close, and he told me kind of 2 or 3 things that they really needed to focus on through that trajectory. And I think business, and particularly in this sector, it's so competitive. It really is going to come down to having the right bums in the right seats. So it's not just a matter of launching through a massive partner, which again, it looks on the surface like Sky Bet. ESPN is, it's the name in town. But I really believe that they're going to have to hire and probably rehire to make sure that they've got the best kind of fighter pilots to make sure that that thing fulfills on the promise. And that just takes time. And so I believe probably Sky, before Sky Bet, had a longer runway of learning. And secondly, they probably were fairly spoiled for choice in terms of who they had running that business. And ultimately, Richard did feel, when we were working together, which is the period around 2018, 2019, that they made 2 or 3 critical choices in their trajectory. Then on ESPN and Penn, I think my worry is, we haven't done much business with Penn. So my worry there is Penn the best fighter pilot for that partnership? Do they have the best product in market? Do they understand how to use media tie-ups so the left hand and right hand work immediately together? And so I do think that ESPN's an amazing business. And most importantly, in sport, a lot of people don't understand where the power of the ad call sits, where the flexibility with rights sit, what can and can't be done. As someone who's spent now quite a lot of my career in digital media, in sport, they are the daddy. The question will be, do they have the product and support to be nimble on the other side to deliver?
To your Penn point, I think a completely different style of company in Barstool, but we've seen obviously that didn't quite work out. So I don't know if there's any learnings for the wider industry there. A point that I'd like to make as well, see if I'm right or wrong, but with ESPN, obviously you've got the media side, but they do also have quite a big fantasy database. So could they, there's a question I've asked a few people, could they follow potentially, perhaps not as successfully, but well, who knows, maybe they will, the FanDuel DraftKings model of let's convert a lot of those fantasy players into sports bettors as well?
I think yes, probably. And now we're starting to get, thankfully, into the weeds. So an example there would be, how much experience do they have converting customers to a subscription or to a LTV product? And I don't believe that ESPN has that much experience. I think they primarily work through cable and distribution. So they're not that used to managing an end customer, as in like a consumer. Whereas a group like Sky, coming back to that, literally are the front end. They're taking your credit card details. And so they understand what customer support looks like, what LTV looks like, how to keep customers there when they're trying to quit or not letting them quit at all. I can have offline jokes about that. But I think there's a big difference between optimizing for LTV and just and being the biggest voice in market. Yeah. And so I then come back to Penn. Will Penn solve for those things? And I think that's a question mark that still remains, whether it's the Barstool example or another. It's a question mark that I think we all should have. Yeah. Particularly around things like loyalty, LTV. I mean, this town's been built on those things, and so the bar is awfully high. I'm not saying that it's insurmountable, but it's awfully high. Yeah.
It's an exciting time for neutrals, people involved in the industry, because we've got ESPN Bet, but then we've also got the Fanatics example. Yeah. And when we talk about conversion, massive company, a slightly different model. The aim is obviously merchandising to sports betting. I mean, I don't know what your views are there.
Again, that's an untested skip in the record. At least the first one that you're challenging me on with ESPN and Penn has been done before. It's been done well through media partnerships. The idea that you're moving from T-shirts to betting, there's a natural question mark there. I think where there's real strength is in a founder-led business. Again, coming back to this town, the nameplate shows that founder-led businesses in betting do win. It's similar in media. There's a lot of founder-led businesses that have been extraordinarily successful. Yeah. So at a large scale. So they've kind of got the right guy in the right seat. And to negate what I was saying before around ESPN not necessarily understanding a consumer retention experience, the whole Fanatics pitch, $30 billion company, has been around, rather than printing and selling T-shirts through third parties, we will own that end consumer. And so big check in that box, probably beyond where people maybe understand. If people want to go away and do a little homework, check out the founder, check where he's come from, check that his CRM creds are better than the best. And so that piece, solved for. The piece that's unsolved for then is how you convince people that that's a betting product that can be known and trusted. Yeah. And weirdly, my first business at age 17 was screen printing T-shirts. I'm not quite sure I could have convinced the people wearing that shirt to place a bet with me. Now, Fanatics is clearly a different level to that whole thing in terms of from mom and pop shop. But when I go to our team, and these are seasoned professionals in the online sports betting and that convergence space towards getting people to convert to a betting name, they actually really feel strongly that the four leaders in the market, being the two digital plays and then MGM and Caesars, they really feel that there's brand equity there, and that brand equity helps our partners and our voice in market convert. And so I think that new voice in market, it's exciting, and they can probably market to their current database, would be their pitch. Yeah. But can they actually get them to press yes on a bet? It's a bit of a skip in the record that's pretty hard to bring together. Yeah. I mean, I would ask you, I know we've had prepared questions, but when I think about trying to move platforms from a broad customer base to monetization, do you think that Twitter would be better placed to start to do that?
It's an interesting question. It's something we have covered in an article before, the amount of betting on Twitter, because there are a lot of sharp players on Twitter as well. I mean, it's an interesting question. I'm used to asking the question, so it's an interesting one to think about.
Well, the thesis,
I haven't answered the question.
The Fanatics thesis is you can move people from having an association with their team and their interests to placing a bet. Yeah. I mean, X has got that times 10, 20, 50, 10,000 in terms of where we are, what we're doing, all the different conversations we're involved in. Yeah. Even ones we don't know we're having, because we don't know when it's open or not open on our phone, seemingly, which is a bit odd in its own way. But putting that aside, we also know that X has aspirations to become a payment platform. But just having a payment platform for payment platforms, for that to exist, probably isn't going to attract consumers. The hook would be actually to say, here's a nice way to match up media with payments, and the easiest way to do that is through an online bet.
So do you think that's something that will happen in the future, or is that more of a, they haven't done it yet, and is that because that shows how difficult it is to actually convert?
On X? Yeah. I think there's a couple steps to it. One is they probably have their own fires to fight internally. Two, Musk's aspiration for X, if you go back 30 years, was to create a payment platform, or 25 years. And maybe his new X is the best way to do that. But number three, in terms of all the different ways that they could get towards becoming a payment platform, how high up the stack does gambling sit? I'm sure, there's a couple checks in the right box. One, a call to action to place a bet is a very compelling call to action for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So that works. The exit, so pardon the pun, the mark against would be the regulatory issues.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm not quite sure, Elon wants to disclose his wealth, et cetera, in a regulated environment, et cetera, and take on gambling in that way.
Yeah.
So that would be maybe the holdback would be the regulatory handcuffs.
Yeah, but that's a whole a whole new field that you've sort of a whole new discussion that you've created there within this interview.
I'm sorry to take that away.
Oh, that's absolutely fine. But when it comes to, previously it was suggested that someone like an Amazon or a Google could get involved in sports betting, and that would change the whole game. But we're yet to see that, and I think possibly some of the reasons maybe not the reasons you've suggested there, but I think maybe it's more a case of scale with that, like Amazon and e-commerce and make so much. The sort of quarterly revenues are, what was it, sort of 200 billion, that kind of thing. It's gambling, I don't know, would probably be a small splash in that ocean, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons there. One is, do they have a stated aspiration to become a payment platform? Two, are they already bumping into regulatory issues? Definitely. And then three, I think right now they're probably making quite a lot of money and happy in their position as a search partner. I'm not quite sure they would need to move into becoming, that there's not enough marginal interest maybe for them to be looking at becoming a kind of a betting affiliate or betting operator, either one of the two. Whereas you look at Twitter, and it's probably kind of more of a natural place to go. They also could probably use the money. And it's funny, sometimes money talks, even for decabillionaires.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe especially for decabillionaires, money talks. You never know.
Yeah. So I definitely appreciate you putting me on the spot earlier with the X thing.
Pleasure.
And I'm going to try my best to flip it over and put you on the spot with a
Don't poke the giant.
Predictions for 2024 and maybe even beyond that. If you were to pick a winner of the market. And when I say winner, not someone who's going to lead the market, because in sports betting right now, that's FanDuel, and that's even if it might change, it's probably not going to for a short while. But if I was to say a winner of 2023, for me, that would be DraftKings, because they have made gains in terms of into FanDuel's market share. In some states, they're the handle leader. In some states, they are the revenue leader, but they've moved towards profitability. And I think 2023 has been a great year for DraftKings. If you were to pick, who could be that kind of, could be DraftKings again, could be someone else in 2024, where would you go with that?
Can I give two answers?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first one is I have to say I'm following your lead, and I think DraftKings now have a lot of momentum. And momentum in consumer mindset. Remember I talked about the value of a franchise?
Yeah.
And those big four. And
brand equity. Kind of.
Yeah, and it's hard to get. It's really hard to get in sports betting. Coming from Europe as we do, people have multiple apps on their phone. And they're always sort of flirting around, going for the offer, going for this, going for the odds, right? Checking, different.
I'm relating to that as a sports bettor right now.
That's terrific. I'm glad you're not killing me out on that one. It's pretty well proven in almost all markets in the world. That's what people do, and so it's a disloyal, by its very nature, it's a disloyal kind of cohort. So to get that momentum is very hard. And it feels like they're now very well managed. They've given up kind of some special projects, which frankly we were a little bit worried about, like where are they going? A key customer of ours, we also really like them. That's another thing in this industry is people don't realize we all know each other and like each other. And it seems really competitive, and I'm sure in some boardrooms it really does, there's a lot of shouting. But at sort of our level, which is kind of, we're big in the affiliate space, but sort of mid-level in terms of operator world, it's pretty congenial. We're all in it together, and we all really want to have like a good customers, more of them. And so I would say, as we've seen the franchise of DraftKings kind of say no to a number of kind of side businesses, and two, really focus on building its franchise. That's a momentum that for me, barring kind of a meteorite hitting within the industry, that's got a lot of promise. And 2024 is just moments away. Yeah. The other piece that when we talked earlier, we do get to chat before the cameras come on. I thought of the kind of the it's one of the oldest games in this town, but one of the newest names in our world. I thought about the Caesars move and what they're going to do next, and putting the right bums on the seats, the right team is now here, et cetera. I think it's really exciting to see that name within the conventional space. But and that's a piece that we have to put our chips behind different names. I think that's one that for us is really interesting. I think the other play though, and I wouldn't single out a single name because it'd be a bit bold, but probably all things being equal, something I got very wrong, and now we're writing that, is we have a lot of customers we convert into this space, and we didn't focus on sweepstakes. And now we are just tapping the glass, and the appetite from the consumer to go and engage there is enormous. And so probably I would say it'll go from a space that you and I understand as people who follow the industry really closely to a sort of, oh my goodness, knuckle in the knee type of growth or hockey stick growth. And that might overexpose them and throw them into a regulatory spotlight. But if they play that all right, and sort of DFS type of gently, going back, whatever it is, 15 years, if that can be managed, again, I preface this with all things being equal, that will be an out of control offering sitting here this time next year. Yeah. Which hopefully we get the chance to do.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the sweepstake piece, very interesting. I'm quite interested to hear Caesars mentioned, because there's a lot of talk about ESPN Bet Fanatics. I'm guilty of that myself. The headline grabbers, FanDuel, DraftKings, and BetMGM. But Caesars, I personally hear mentioned less. So it's interesting to, as you say, that brand equity, and they've got the right team in place. Let's watch that space, I think.
Yeah, it's also maybe a bit simpler proposition to manage because it's not a JV.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so I think that, at that level, when we kind of have people pitch in to either invest in or advise the company, one thing they really like is we've got a really strong and united board behind us, and a group of investors who really want us to remain private and grow we've got a lot of momentum, so people don't want to sell, right? That's why there's more inbounds than outbounds. That's how the valuation of something goes up. So more buyers than sellers, simple. And I think around the table, that simple structure will serve Caesars very well. And they also have, for me, a kind of understated competitive advantage, which is they can bring together both land-based and digital. And I think if they really think about how to do that in a thoughtful way, then that will be extremely powerful. I mean, you think of the revitalization post-COVID of Vegas. We couldn't even get a room in their hotel. And so, these companies really know how to make the most of their assets, and I think that convergence could be kind of the race in the hole.
As you say, hopefully we can sit back here again this time next year and look back on how Caesars have progressed. But
that'd be fun.
I think some strong points there. There's no pressure on them. There's a few competitive advantages you've named there, but if they get it right, powerful tools.
There's also an undercurrent right now in terms of the state of the market. And there's really 4 states that have legalized casino versus, depending how you measure regulated, in sport just under 30. And so I think that's if you look at the pie just by regulatory point of view, put that one aside, and then you look at it just by money point of view, and the pie reverses. Almost literally. And so what you've got there is a brand that's very, very strong in casino. And so that reversed pie, to me, if I was, at which I'm not on their board or had a voice at that level, it would be like, actually, we have an amazing franchise in the world of online betting. It's just not yet online sports betting. And so they can kind of, what's it called, punch above their weight.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, been terrific discussing the industry with you. Like I say, let's do it again sometime soon.
Pleasure.
And thanks for your time.
Thank you again. See you in a year's time.
Absolutely.